much. Well, before opening the floor for questions from the audience, I have a couple of questions, follow-up questions on what you already mentioned. So first question I would like to ask to Daniel and to Philippe, because we are talking about this 43% of Europeans who don't have basic digital skills, and we are talking about low-skilled adult learners. But in this super broad group, there are different groups like seniors or people with disabilities or people on social care or unemployed, etc. And of course, they have all different needs. So we need tailored approaches to each of these groups. So from your perspective, how can we ensure that these groups really, who is the responsible? You mentioned that government and industry is responsible because industry is interested in people having the right skills for their jobs, but also the government should care more in general that people are critical citizens and can participate in general in the society. How can we better understand the needs of these specific target groups? Do we need maybe more research? Who should fund it? Can we go to companies or to governments and ask them, hey, we need to look deeper and understand exactly what these people need?
From my perspective, I think that the local actors are to be involved. I mean, the social actors in the cities or the villages, or the librarians, all the people who are working day by day with those people who are excluded. And those people are never trained, or even it's logic because they learn social assistance, but not digital stakes. So there I think a lot of people who are working with those people, but they didn't understand that they can play a role in this in face of this situation. I think that could be a place to think about.
I would say research, yes, but research not in the way that we think in terms of developing new high-tech solutions for that. It's actually low-tech solutions that are needed. You mentioned public libraries and things like that. There's a couple of interesting practices. I think of Estonia, which were the first ones to introduce an all-digital tax declaration. And when they introduced this, they also introduced a program for young people to volunteer to help older persons to do this. So it was a public-funded, organized scheme to bring people to do that. Another idea that's been floating around now in France is rural public service houses, which should respond to the fact that many public services are leaving the rural areas and are concentrated sometimes up to 80 kilometers away from the people that they administer. So to counter that, there's the idea of to create on local level houses that bring in different public services who can come like once in a week or have specific times. Why not introduce a digital service there where people can access a computer or a smartphone or whatever and have assistance of people who know how to help them, a little bit like public libraries, but not necessarily with books, but with the service that you know from libraries.
Can I add something? This kind of services exist in Belgium, in the public espace public numérique. There's this kind of thing, but the people who are there for the trainers are trained to technical skills, and the other question are not. They're feeling uncomfortable with that also. So I think we need to train those trainers to see what is beyond the skills. And it's not a matter of only use the bank app or filling a survey somewhere or using the city services. It's also seeing what is behind and what are doing those people in their home when they are at home. What they use, what kind of services they use for sharing with their families, by instance.
I mean, add on that, because I think that relates to what you just said at the beginning as well. You were mentioning the problem that now technologies are so usable that it becomes a bit redundant probably to learn about how to use them. And I think that's a matter of perception in a way. So there is, because technologies are so pervasive, there is a discrepancy between the technical skills that you're just mentioning, that are those that are developed in several programs, not only in Belgium but in several member states, I would say. But also there is a problem of awareness, and that's why I think we mainly talk about digital competence rather than just digital skills, taking into account also the knowledge but also the attitudes. And this problem of awareness is a problem that I think is hitting everyone, probably also us here in the room, because we know, we think we know about technologies, we think we have critical understanding and critical thinking, but I think that, I don't want you to raise your hands, but I think that every one of us probably shared a piece of news at least once in their life through social media without checking if the content of it was true or not, probably. And if we think about that, we might think, okay, yeah, well, probably I was just doing it superficially, it was just for fun, it was just, but we are all, in a way, critical users of technologies. So I think that there are several problems to this. But then to come back to your question, and you were asking about research, I think, so the obvious answer was the Commission should fund probably more research. After we are funding, and we had a social inclusion call that came out in February this year about media literacy, so there were several aspects and pillars. One was on media literacy and the other was on digital skills and cooperation between schools, libraries, NGOs and also businesses and private sector. So there are calls that are funded, but my personal, not Commission, understanding is that instead of research we need action. Because this is an urgent problem and it's actually a problem that where we are not moving forward. So you were talking about the participation of adults in lifelong learning. That's stagnating, we're not reaching our objective. But also, I mean, we do not have a benchmark on the level of digital skills yet. But we know that the level of this 43%, we have been having that for years, and we're not improving on this percentage. So I think it's definitely time for action.
I can comment on that. I think I would underline the, yes, research is important, and as things go on, it's important to keep abreast of those developments. But I entirely underline the point that we need action. Everyone agrees on the policy narrative. Everyone agrees that this is important, but we need to actually make it happen for people on the ground. I would maybe, in that frame, highlight two words, trust and motivation. Firstly, people need to trust what is happening. This is particularly key for people who are a few steps away from whether it be the labour market or formal structures. And they also need to have the motivation to engage. Whilst we can say nice words at the political level or at the policy discourse, for people on the ground, if I have poor digital skills and I'm working in a crappy job, let's say I'm employed, and you think, well, okay, why should I? Do I have the time in terms of managing my own home requirements, my work requirements? I'm running just to keep up. You're telling me it's important to have these skills, but what are you going to do for me and what will I get from it? And I think we need to make those messages convincing and to put in place structures which help people to get the right support that they need in the right environment that will help them take things to the next level and be very concrete about it. And I think this is where the kind of European policy making has to join up with the very local level action. And in some of these instances, it's only via very local level action that you will access some of these people, because they are invisible, to use your word, on many other radars. Particularly if you're not unemployed, you don't go to the Public Employment Service. If you are not somehow in education and training, or you're not picked up by social services somehow, you risk falling off the radar. And how can we also help those people engage?
Thank you very much. I have one more follow-up question on the role of the European Union and the European Commission, and then I will also open the floor for questions from the audience. Well, we already touched upon this issue, and we already discussed that digital inclusion and digital transformation is a concern of different policies, digitalization, but also employment and social affairs and education and training. And one of the purposes of coming together today, but also in general, is to discuss how can we formulate integrated policies, because we already mentioned that maybe it's oversimplistic, but it's true that different areas, policy areas, are pushing for different priorities, and somehow the basic digital skills for adult learners fall in between those, in a kind of crack between those priorities. So how at Commission level, if the Commission's role is also to encourage member states, which then could go to the local level to formulate integrated measures, how can also these measures be formulated at the European level?
Okay, now you get me jumping up and down like an Irishman. I am the William that I was supposed to be. I completely disagree. Adult people with lower level skills and lower level digital skills also have not fallen between the cracks. They are very much at the European policy level, right up there. The question is that looking at, I mentioned the initiative on upskilling pathways before, which really is about these people. This, which came forward in 2016, which is a council recommendation, which is now being implemented on the ground in member states with mixed progress. But the political imperative is there, and the member states are committing to doing something. It takes time, we realise. The political guidelines and the mission letters to the commissioners now include, for example, look to explore individual learning accounts for adults. This is also an area that can provide concrete help for those people. So I think there is no absence of political will. At the European policy level, we know about these people. We know, and we're worried about them. Both from a social justice perspective, but also from an economic perspective, frankly, because we basically cannot afford to have them not engaged and contributing economically to our overall prosperity and to helping themselves and their families gain a decent life. So I think I kind of get back down off the soapbox, but absolutely, they're up there on the priority list.
Yeah. No, I just agree.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. We are happy to hear this and to work together also on this priority. Okay, well, I would like to open the floor for questions from our participants. No? Okay. Okay, one question.
Since there weren't any. I'm Ian Clifford, I'm from All Digital. I think it's all very well to say that priority target people are well identified, and I think they are. The challenge in my mind is, having been involved in this for 20 plus years, is that funding at a local level gets cut. Again and again and again. Libraries have closed across the whole of Europe. NGOs have been struggling for funding for decades. The priorities remain the same, although they change and they recycle and they become youth employability is 1 year, migrants, work returners, whatever. It flows and changes. And underlying all of that is digital skills. And at a local level or at a member state level, politics keeps undermining the higher level objectives. How can that be solved?
I can have a go. It's a damn good question, and absolutely the issue of how to make it happen at the very local level is, and the funding to enable that to happen is crucial. And whatever funding that the EU has to do that can only be a drop in the ocean, and it can only try and incentivize some things. What we have much more as a policy instrument, let's say, is something called the European semester. And via the European semester of economic policy coordination, we issue country-specific recommendations to countries. And by issuing those country-specific recommendations, we say that they have to work on specific areas, and we also make some funding conditional on working on those particular areas. So in that way, we can nudge countries, we can push countries to work on particular things that we see as urgent priorities, but it can only go part of the way, absolutely.
Just regarding the funding of those very local actors, the problem is today that the way to gain funding by the euro is very hard in terms of administrative, in terms of justifying every euro you get. It's very hard. I know a lot of local actors who say no to the funding by the European Union because it's too hard in terms of administrative procedure. So today there is money still, but we need to be very professional, and there is only a few organizations professional in this kind of fights who can win the money, to make it simple. And there is a big problem. In media animation we are quite organized to win that kind of project, but a lot of our partners cannot do it because they are too small. Five workers, one need to be dedicated to all the administrative rules. For example, that's sad because they are in need of this money, but they cannot afford it, win it. Sorry.
I have a comment on the European semester, which, well, is very much known and very much said, but it's still something that is inherent in the European semester. It is a tool of economic policy coordination. The social came afterwards, the Europe 2020 strategy came afterwards, the European Pillar of Social Rights came afterwards, and first and foremost, it is an application of the Stability and Growth Pact. And in the application of the Stability and Growth Pact, all the first recommendations will always be: look at your public budget, don't have too high indebtedness level, not too many new debts and things like that. And now the situation is a bit better, so there are member states who have to be nudged into investing, which is a notable shift. But there's also many member states where they say in the first recommendation, please spend less, and then the next couple of recommendations are, you should invest into this, this, and this. So there's still a bit of contradiction, and the economic rationale is still foremost. It's still a priority. Secondly, something where we as an organization around older persons always also have a bit of difficulty with is the idea of economic return. Because many initiatives in lifelong learning are directed towards the labor market. the upskilling pathways is directed towards low-skilled workers, which says essentially when you're 65 or whatever the pension age is, you're no longer concerned by this measure. So afterwards you fall off and there's no initiative for you. There are some initiatives I know. You can have, in terms of European level, you can have some funding for adult education staff, so only the organizers, not the learners. In Erasmus Plus, you can have funding from the European Social Fund in a certain way, but it needs. But it needs to be a local priority. It needs to be pushed on by the local level. Even if it's not because the money is there that people actually use it, and people need to have the idea that well, they can also invest it in somewhere else than into educating workers, which is the great priority to have, educating low-skilled workers and so on. But it's sometimes a bit limited to that.